Married people of Reddit, what's one thing you didn't learn about your spouse until after your wedding day? I have a friend who was born and raised in Romania in a relatively poor family. His favorite section of a loaf of bread was the crusts on either end, possibly even his favorite food in general. So when he got married to a woman from Australia, he started leaving the crusts for her because they're the best, so he wanted her to have them. Well, typically in Australia we throw away the end crusts, so when my friend left them, she assumed he didn't want them either and threw them away. They were married 4 years before he caught her tossing them and got confused. My wife can't whistle, and she's never had a sloppy joe. Well, you can fix one of those things. She often shoots a thin stream of saliva out of her mouth when she yawns. Apparently she more consciously covered her mouth beforehand. He likes to eat fish. Somehow in our 6 years of dating, I got it into my head that he didn't like to eat seafood. My parents would cook dinner and invite him, and I'd constantly tell my mom, "No, can you make something else?" He doesn't eat fish. My husband loves most seafood, with the singular, random exception of coconut shrimp. We joke about that to this day, that I unintentionally kept him from some of his favorite foods without so much as a conversation about it. That's a light-hearted answer. I'm sure there are many more. 11 years in, and we are still learning things about one another. My husband and I were married for over 6 years before we realized that we had been buying no pulp orange juice because we both thought the other hated pulp. Something similar yet different. I was living with my girlfriend when I was younger. I had a blue toothbrush. Hers was pink. About 1 month later we realized we were both using the blue one. My wife and I have done the same thing. One night we went to brush at the same time and got very confused. She's always leaving the lids on everything unscrewed, and guess who is always breaking jars because he always picks everything up using the lid? That he lives and breathes sports. I knew he liked sports when we were dating, but I didn't realize that's all he liked. I didn't know he would rather watch football games on Sundays than go to family dinners or anywhere else. I didn't realize he wouldn't want to watch anything but sports on TV. I didn't know that he would want to play or watch basketball/football/baseball/golf every waking moment. I didn't know he would prefer sports to sex. I was gobsmacked. Been together 20 years. Married for 17. I've been telling the same dad joke since I was about 17. Whenever someone says something was intense, I always respond with "like the circus." My wife has been rolling her eyes at it for nearly 20 years, until about 6 months ago. I gave my lame response to her, but instead of rolling her eyes at me, they got really big, like I saw the light bulb go off. Then she chuckled. She never got the joke until then. My wife cannot read an analog watch/clock for time. Married 4 years, been together 7 years total, and somehow that came up only a month ago when I asked for the time off a watch during a power outage. I don't give her a hard time about it, but that was a fun fact to learn. My mom found out my dad was a compulsive liar when his twin sister didn't show up to their wedding. When questioned about it, he said she must have imagined the dozens of stories he had told about his twin sister. He is an only child. What the actual duck? How did he not think that one would come up again? My sister married a guy like that. In the first 6 months after the wedding we found out he had lied about his previous job. He wasn't a history professor apparently. His house back at his country and the fact that it was damaged by a hurricane. He didn't even own a house. His previous marriage, unfaithful ex-wife and him having kids. He was married, but only for a couple of years and those kids were not his. She kicked him out. His mom being dead, a really WTF moment for us and her. His other relatives like cousins, etc. treating him badly. We couldn't figure out why nobody in his family wanted to help, or even come for a wedding. Turns out he's a pathological liar hated by everyone. Needless to say they are separated now. What an absolute goofball he was. He was always so serious when we were dating. Now he can't carry on a serious conversation. Definitely some pros and cons there. My ex told me his middle name was James. I saw afterwards on his driver's license that it was John. He would lie about random stuff all the time, for no good reason. That's called compulsive lying. Not me, but my mom. She found out that my dad already had a kid when they got married. I was the kid that my dad never told his new wife about. They had 3 kids together before she found out about me. My struggling mom filed for financial assistance, and when they found out she wasn't getting child support for me, they tracked my dad down easily through his government job and started docking his wages. I was 12, and that's how he had to tell his wife about this glaring omission from his past. Not me, but my mom found out decades later my dad was married when he married her, so yeah, my dad's a bigamist. How insane his mother is. He was clear that they had a difficult relationship when he was growing up, and that he is really close with his dad because of her behavior. Since we've been married, she's been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, and her health professionals say it's likely she has genetic degenerative neurology, Huntington's. That he can't put stuff back where it goes, ever, and oh yeah, he shot a guy once. Update, wow, I had no idea this many people would even see my answer. Thanks for the silver and the hilarious responses. He is over here laughing, and unarmed. Short explanation is that he was assaulted outside a bar. Guy pulled a gun, he took it away, and popped the guy in the leg. My husband actually is a veteran, but thankfully spent most of his service time on a ship working on airplanes. He never saw any action, or had to fire any weapons outside of training. And the bar was not in Reno. Lol. That probably makes you apprehensive to call him out about things, like putting stuff back where it goes for instance. She's a great swimmer. One day, after we'd been married for about 7 years, we joined a gym with a swimming pool. She challenged me to a race. Okay, I thought, I'm a pretty good swimmer. I was surprised when she offered me a half-length head start, and then doubly surprised when despite my massive head start she beat me easily. Apparently she used to be a competition swimmer at school. She's basically half dolphin, but she'd never happened to mention it before. Didn't notice her fins? Been there, but she'd never happened to mention it before. That's because she was holding it in reserve. It took a lot of effort. Her family had to never mention it either. Everyone had to make sure you never see the photos or an old yearbook. If she ever ran into an old friend, she had to steer the conversation away from all things water related. This plot was years in the making. He has aphantasia. It's a neurological condition where you can't recall memories as pictures or create images in your mind. He cannot and has never been able to picture what he is reading in a book or say, conjure an image of a forest or person in his mind. He can't imagine my face when I'm not there, though it's not like he forgets it. I'm the total opposite and always picture everything in my mind. I'm an artist and my job would be hard if I couldn't, so to me it's like in a way he's blind. It's just a different way of experiencing life I guess, but I was really sad for him when I found out. We lived together before we got married, so no surprises like how he kept his toothpaste or anything. Horribly and weirdly squeezes from the middle. We have 2 separate tubes and it's great lol. He absolutely cannot be trusted with desserts in the house. Back when we were engaged he'd give me time to eat my half of the ice cream or Oreo package, or whatever we had on hand. Now, I'm sitting here eating Thin Mints from a stash from under frozen Vegas in our outside freezer. That she was adopted. In fairness, she didn't know either. I'm happily divorced now, almost 12 years, now that I do the math, but after we got married I learned that she viewed her money as her money and my money as our money. Which was interesting, because before we got married my money was our money and she didn't have money to speak of. Not that I was even making good money. But after we got married she got a well-paying job and suddenly her money was hers and mine wasn't mine. It didn't last long after that. That she sneezes, like she trying to scare the shirt out of you. Scream sneeze. I'm still not used to it now. 10 years later. Duck, it's loud as hell. Our poor daughter gets scared and says mommy you're too loud, but in public she can hold it back. Just how much she really loves Christmas. We lived together before we were married and it wasn't that bad, but the moment we said I do, it changed. Now, she starts the Christmas train in ducking October. I'm talking the tree, garland, and goddamn Michael Bublé. When I asked her about this, she said oh, we are married now, so you have to like this too. Purely joking but damn. He'd never been to a funeral. It didn't come up until we had to attend one, and he had questions. My wife is allergic to all artificial sweeteners. During the second night of our honeymoon we decided to stay in and get some takeout. My beverage of choice at the time was Crystal Light Raspberry Ice, which contains aspartame. While we were eating she wasn't thinking, and she asked for a sip. About 5 minutes later she became extremely ill and started having issues breathing. After a few minutes she read the ingredients on my beverage and yelled at me, "I am allergic to aspartame." Me, being the loving new husband, I yelled back, "Since when? You never told me that." She never bothered to tell me because she grew up in a household with no artificial sweeteners because she was allergic. Edit, not changing the original text, but looking back, using the word allergic may have been a misnomer. She is allergic to aspartame, but only intolerant to other artificial sweeteners. The level of intolerance varies greatly, so we just avoid it altogether. Sounds like a great way to really start your honeymoon. Like when my parents did one of those private plane tours of the Grand Canyon as part of their honeymoon, and only after they landed again did my dad tell my mom he was afraid of heights. We were both on the same page in a newspaper. It was found a couple years after we were married. Was it the local arrests section? No, it was the obituaries. Unless asked specifically to do something around the house, wife won't do it, with rare exceptions. Like she doesn't get mad when I'll ask her to clean or do dishes or anything. She just doesn't think about it. A friend of mine eventually told his now wife that he didn't actually know French. He had been teaching her gibberish phrases. My husband and I dated for 3 years before we got married. After more than a year of marriage, he let slip that he is lactose intolerant. He knew that I absolutely love ice cream and we would frequently get ice cream on our dates. But he never wanted me to know about the lactose intolerance so that I could be happy with my ice cream. Damn, there must have been nights he was scramming to get away so he could take a nasty shit and puke at the same time. LMAO. Not me, but my parents. My mom learned that my dad was into some heavy debt after the wedding, literally like a week after, and she also learned that he was never going to give up his bachelor life for a more stable family life, even though he had a wife and child. Happy times, this family. This sounds like the situation my sister is in. A month after their marriage, debt collectors for tens of thousands of dollars contracted her. She's now in the process of paying down his debts while working 40+ hours and raising their toddler. He watches YouTube. When I visit I'm really not sure what he does. Sounds like the husband wanted a mother, not a wife. Not me, but my mom. She found out my dad was extremely addicted to porn. They worked really hard to overcome it. She's only mentioned it once, but I got the feeling it was super hard for her to decide to stay. Edit, I get it. My choice of words wasn't the best. Contrary to what my ex-wife said when we were dating, I learned she believed that sex was just for making kids. That I'm solely responsible for her dreams, and I don't mean the want to have kids one day kind. Have those. I mean the type where she wakes me at 3 AM and begins the conversation with "you wouldn't let me have the ducking window seat," because apparently in her dream I wouldn't swap seats with her on the plane. She was mad at me for at least a week. This sort of thing has happened a few times. She changed a whole lot after the wedding. From wanting kids to not. From hating her parents and the way they treated other people to siding with them. Her mom was a nurse who constantly talked about patients negatively, and her dad was an entitled business owner who tried to run people off the road constantly. Awful road rage. They both were the type of Christians that give the whole religion a bad name. She ended up remarrying one of my old college buddies shortly after the divorce. She is a bit of a genius when it comes to finances. No complaints. My wife is as well. If it were up to me, I would have lots of cool shit, but no power, because I'd be broke. She saves me from me. In Japan it's almost entirely like that across the board. The husband makes the money and the wife manages it and makes all the decisions with it. Supposedly the husband gets an allowance every week. All this time I didn't know I was Japanese. Huh. She microwaves cheap shredded cheese on a plate until it's crispy and then picks it off and eats it with her fingers. When we moved into our first house, he started putting things away in the wrong door/cabinet/closet on purpose just to mess with me. He gets such a perverse pleasure in hearing me yell, seriously, whenever I find one. Edit, my first gold. Thank you, kind stranger. PS. I was way more amused by the attention that this comment received than he was lol. He's a slob. Apparently, while we were dating he was on his best behavior, but after? Dear God. Clothes everywhere. Hats everywhere. Paper everywhere. He throws dirty clothes next to the hamper. My biggest beef is how he'll just set dirty dishes on the island, rather than walk an extra 5 steps to put them in the sink. Also, he loses everything. He's lost so many sunglasses that I had to put my foot down and tell him he can't buy any more. At $200 a pop it ain't happening. He loses his wallet regularly and he had his Apple Watch for maybe 3 months. Once, he lost $300 between work and home. He swears he had it in the car and didn't stop anywhere on the way home. So where it went nobody knows. If I had the money that we've spent on shit he's lost in the last 20 years, I could pay cash for a brand new car. Edit, no, he didn't have a drug or gambling problem. I'm 100% sure. He's only lost money that one time and it's most likely because he didn't put it in his wallet. Lots of little things. She has an encyclopedic knowledge of Jackie Chan movies. She doesn't eat cauliflower because it gives her gas. She tends to do things by doing a little bit every day over a long period of time. He dunks his Oreos in water instead of milk. I still don't know why. Edit, wow, I didn't expect so many people to have opinions about Oreos. I'm glad I'm not the only one who is horrified by this. Thanks for the silver. To answer a few questions, no, he is not lactose intolerant, and no, he wasn't poor growing up. He's not a vegan. And we had milk in the house when I caught him doing this. He just prefers to dunk his Oreos in water. Husband broke, you've gotta throw the whole thing out. That he was abusive. It started out subtly enough, and I was naive enough to not recognize it for what it was. Once we were married it began to steadily escalate until it became non-stop, especially once I started to pull away from how miserable it made me, even before I knew it was all classified as abuse. Edit, wow, I didn't expect so many people to see this. Just so no one has to go hunting through the replies. Yes, I'm in the process of getting away. It's very uncertain and scary, but I know it's for the best. He's more of a cat person than I am, and I love it. Married for almost 5 years, together for almost 8. Just found out last month that he eats his fingernails when biting his nails. We were on the couch, and he was biting, and I asked where he was putting the nails, because I didn't want them left on the couch, and he was like, nowhere. Me, you've been eating them? How did I never know? All these years. How resourceful he really is. I swear, he can do anything. He builds and repairs computers, cooks and bakes, does carpentry, some light electrician work, fixes appliances, installs flooring, has helped me dye and straighten my hair, and I have long, thick hair lol, and he picked up photography and wedding videography like he's been doing it his whole life. After we got married, my husband told me that every night, while we were still dating, he'd hold in his gas, and as soon as he left my place he'd fart all the way home. My husband goes sock, shoe, sock, shoe instead of sock, shoe, shoe. Ducking psychopath. She leaves a few seconds on the microwave. There's only so many times a guy can ask her to press the clear button. It's even the same as the stop button. Just press it twice. I wouldn't be surprised if she tortured animals as a child. She's a savage. My husband doesn't like the smell of old books. I grew up loving old libraries and old books. He can't stand them. It was a gradual realization, not a dramatic reveal. Also, and much bigger, is that he has no conflict resolution skills. 20 years of marriage and we've never actually resolved an argument. We just wait until I quit being mad long enough to have lots of sex and we are good until the next argument. The times we've tried to work through things always made it worse. At least we still have great sex. You should both read the book called Nonviolent Communication. It's sold but frickin' excellent and will teach you both everything. Edit by Marshall Rosenberg. But he can't read the book. It'll have an old book smell. She says pamphlet instead of pamphlet. Things are different now. For some who don't know, the spouse would usually announce if they are a witch or wizard after marriage. My mum's first husband thought married women were basically property and treated women in general like shit after they had married. Glad to see the first husband part there. She makes PB&J sandwiches by mixing the peanut butter and jelly in a separate bowl before spreading it on the bread. Pure savagery. Thanks for the silver, stranger. That my wife is a real savage, and had she not decided to go into medicine, she has both the temperament and the skill to have been a world-class military sniper or a contract killer. And 15 years of marriage later, I'm still not altogether convinced she wasn't at some point. Without belaboring the details, my wife is an extremely even-tempered, unflappable, compartmentalized, methodical, and highly reticent, but very funny, person. She will never tell you about her day or what she does for a living, unless you ask. I asked her once if surgery made her nervous, and she said, quite the contrary, it's a rush, and she is so focused that time seems to slow down for her. She is utterly unfazed by lots of blood spurting in every direction. Overall, I'd say she has very little ego, which naturally makes her eminently teachable. If you give her 10 instructions, she'll do 9 of them perfectly on the first go. Give her 10 more, and she'll fix the last one, and again do 9 more perfectly. She has mad shooting skills which she says she didn't know she had, but I kinda don't believe her. But I found out after I once took her to a range. And then there was a time, while watching an action movie, I forgot which one. She said, this movie is stupid. If it were me, I'd just sit in a tree for a week and get him when he came out of his house. And knowing her now as I do, I think she could easily lie in wait for a week and not move a muscle. So, either she trolled me really hard early on to keep me in line, or she's just a savage. Update. I should have added that my wife is actually a very kind, generous person. All her patients completely love her. She's not type A at all. I totally am, which is why this realization didn't come until after we were married. When we were dating, I kinda didn't believe her that she was a surgeon until she showed me a video of a surgery she had done. She allowed a patient to have someone video it. She was all cammied up in her OR kit with gown and face shield, etc. And she was all business, telling everyone what to do while she cut. That was my first wait. What with her? I should have paid more attention to that lol. Been with my husband for 9 years total, married for 2. Just last week, found out he doesn't care for bubble wrap. I was shook when I found out. He asked me why. Do you think I always gave you the bubble wrap when I had it? Well, it's because I thought you loved me and wanted me to enjoy it more. I feel betrayed. You may feel betrayed, but remember, he could have thrown it out instead of giving it to you. So, he still does do it out of love. My husband loves telling this story. He is a big meat and potatoes guy. On our honeymoon, I told him that I was becoming vegetarian. It was something I'd been thinking about for a while and couldn't implement well while living with my parents. When we got back from vacation, we fell into a routine where I did all the cooking. Turns out that he is lazier about cooking than he likes eating meat. Also, it turns out I'm a pretty good vegetarian cook. He now eats vegetarian whenever we are at home and gets meat at restaurants when he goes out with his friends. He's totally happy with it, truly. It has been 10 years. He's the best. If I had someone cooking for me every meal, I'd eat that. Simple as that. That he would make a fantastic father. This is the nicest. Wholesome AF. Not me, but my parents. My dad is deathly afraid of spiders, and he didn't realize an important trait for his spouse was spider killer. Fortunately for him, my mom fit the bill. That he plays video games for 10 to 15 hours a day, even when he is married and has kids and has a full-time job. With marriage counseling, he cut back to 5 hours a day. It's now, year 22, back up to about 7 hours a day on weekdays. I never knew marriage was going to be this lonely. My wife informed me that she could not have children after we got married. This made me sad. Being able to prove her wrong made me happy. I'm glad it sounds like this story has a happy ending, but it is super messed up that your wife didn't tell you that till after the wedding, right? How is that not a major thing to talk about with a person before you attach your life to theirs? That he had absolutely no idea about how credit cards worked. That was a fun one. That she's married. You've reached the end of this video, the Reddit gods, and I thank you. Please consider liking and subscribing for more top-notch content. Goodbye.